Let me tell you a story. So, it's 2019, and the video game company Arcane are on top of the world. After years of goodwill built up from their work on the Dishonored franchise, and a cult following from their 2017 release, Prey, fans are ecstatic when a brand new teaser drops for Arcane's next big project at the E3 2019 Bethesda Showcase.
This teaser revealed a brand new world set on an island called Blackreef, stuck in some sort of Groundhog Day time loop stasis, with two characters, an older man and a younger woman, tracking down and Minecrafting each other again and again and again. With a fascinating concept and a gorgeous 60s-era Saul Bass-inspired pop art style, Arcane's Deathloop announcement stole the show and captured the imagination of many fans, including me. Deathloop released in 2021 to high review scores and generally positive word of mouth. The game puts you into the role of Colt Vaughn, a former military man who begins to realize that he's trapped in an endless loop, repeating the same day on this mysterious island over and over again, no matter what he does. He quickly meets a woman named Juliana, and I do mean quickly. The second you press the start button, she fucking Minecrafts you. Juliana serves as the game's antagonist. As Colt travels around Blackreef trying to break the time loop by assassinating key targets, Juliana tracks Colt down and tries to take him out as well. Mechanically, this means that sometimes when you're exploring the game's levels, Juliana will spawn in and lock all the exit doors. Either Juliana gets you, or you get her. This is unusually aggressive and in your face for a video game antagonist. Most game villains will send minions to come kill the player for them, or place the player into a series of challenges or puzzles, or the villain will be a more generalized concept like the state or entropy. This behavior informs the audience about Juliana's character. She's not a brute or a monster waiting at the end of a boss dungeon. She's a hedonist who loves the loop and hates you, and will take immense joy in fighting the player, whether she wins or loses. Additionally, once you've reached a certain point playing as Colt, you unlock the ability to instead play as Juliana. Oh, did I forget to mention? When Juliana invades your game, it's actually another player who has jumped in with the specific goal of killing Colts in a bizarre, immersive sim reimagining of the Dark Souls invader mechanic. Juliana has access to a number of unique abilities, including a disguise power that lets her turn into any NPC in the level, allowing the player controlling Juliana to be a bit sneaky and play mind games with their opponent.
But here comes the wrinkle. So you have this badass, awesome villain character in the form of Juliana, but how do you make her fun to play? Well, the first step is to give her fun and exciting gameplay, and she's got that. Juliana's cat and mouse gameplay style is undeniably fun to engage with, but people love big villain characters like Bowser and Dr. Eggman and GLaDOS because they're so much fun to hate. But try to imagine a game where you play as Bowser, and his personality is exactly the same. He's not really humanized or whatever.
As much as we might want him to be.
And you'll start to realize how difficult it is to make a game where you play as a villain who's actually fun to play. How do you take a character whose whole thing is villainy and make them enjoyable to embody without gutting their established personality? Well, Deathloop's solution to this is twofold. One, get some of the best voice actors in the business to voice your characters. And two, just make them hate each other.
Miss me?
Colt is played by Jason E. Kelly. Primarily a TV actor, Kelly has done some voice acting for games before Deathloop, such as playing Doom Guy in the Doom Eternal DLC, and some voice work after, such as Bohai in Horizon Forbidden West.
We found Thebes, the final resting place of Ted Pharaoh's secrets. It isn't far.
Juliana, meanwhile, is played by none other than Ozioma Akaga, the voice of Alex Vance from Half-Life Alyx, among many other roles.
I know! Oh, thank God.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
It was on your face and it was disgusting.
Yeah, it was.
Without a doubt, the one thing Deathloop has that no other game can compare to is the performance relationship between Kelly and Akaga. I mean, just listen to them work.
Oh, you always fall for the same old shit. Just once, please. Can you try your hardest to make this interesting?
Whoa. What the fuck is this?
Carnesis! You're gonna give me that attitude? You know, I usually make it easy for you, you ungrateful prick. But...
Colt, you're never, ever going to break the loop. It's absolutely impossible.
You want me to break it? You don't want me to break it. What do you want from me?
I want you to not suck.
Okay, it's been a pretty shitty morning. or 2, so I'm done. With you and all of this, it ends. Today.
You don't even know where to start.
Up, Dom. Obviously. Juliana!
You don't call me, I call you.
Where's my LPP?
I'm not done. This isn't your show, it's mine. I run this place. You want out? You gotta go through me.
That what this is? Some sort of hostile job takeover.
How does security protects the loop? The opposite of whatever it is you're doing right now.
Cool. So I'll just do your old thing then. What was that? Writing hacky bullshit for a bunch of dickbags and I don't...
Looks like somebody came by to say hi.
I'm not finished yet.
I locked the doors so the two of you can get acquainted.
What? Doors!
2 little tunnels. Brilliant design, really, and all courtesy of the captain.
Listen to the way these characters interact, the cadence and flow of their words. Without fail, it always sounds natural and realistic. Now, I don't think that they had the voice actors acting across from each other in the VO booth. I imagine, like most productions, they were recording their lines separately, but...
There are rules, Colt, and sometimes people bend the rules, and sometimes
Blah,
they break
blah,
them.
blah,
Dr.
blah.
Bungie read the rules, then lit the rules
She's
on
a
fire.
brilliant
She's
scientist.
a brilliant scientist.
Aren't they always brilliant? That's why they're fucking scientists.
Are you talking when I was talking?
it kinda sounds like it, right?
Deathloop asks the player to repeatedly go to the same handful of levels at different times of day, studying the movements and patterns of your assassination targets to develop the perfect run to hit all of them in one single loop. Because of this gameplay structure, you'll often find yourself backtracking or returning to areas that you've already been to. If you go to Carl's Bay in the morning to Minecraft the cult leader Harriet Moores, but fuck it up and let her get away, you need to wait an entire day to go back and try again. To prevent this pattern from getting dull, Juliana will often call Colt as he's entering a new area, and they'll exchange a quick piece of dialogue.
I was just thinking.
What do you get out of this? Why are you talking to me?
It's fun. You know, I was going to tell you something about Harry, but if you don't want me to...
I want to know what the fuck is going on.
Oh, you don't want that. You're looking for purpose.
I'm looking for the fastest way out of this place.
Don't rush it. You used to love it here.
Once I got a handle on the world and the core gameplay and the time loop mechanic, I found that these little snippets of conversation between our protagonist and our antagonist were actually the thing meaningfully keeping me going, keeping me invested in the game. Getting to hear a new line of dialogue between these two was, in some ways, even more rewarding than the actual game objectives.
How does it feel to be dead?
At least I left a pretty corpse.
Next time, focus less on your outfit and more on your situational awareness. What the fuck? No wonder she hates me. She misses all my best material.
Usually Colt is playing the straight man in these interactions. Colt can act surprised or confused or aghast at Juliana's venomous aggression, and the player can enjoy the odd couple rivalry of their relationship. Akaga has this incredible ability to play not just anger or malice, but specifically seething aggression. Her insults feel not just cutting, but scalding. Like a blade that's so hot, it cauterizes the wound even as it slices your skin.
Seriously? It's not always about you, Colt. You know, I cannot believe the shit that comes out of your mouth. You're broken. You're just a broken man that repeats the same fucking answer over and over and over again.
So is this about you or Charlie or... No, wait. It is about me, isn't it? Like a reverse psychology thing or...
Fuck it.
As the game progresses, you learn what happened to Colt as well. You discover that he was stuck on Black Reef once before and spent a full 17 years in the time loop before escaping, only to return once more for mysterious reasons. During this period away from Black Reef, he was institutionalized in a mental hospital, and Kelly reflects that aspect of his character in Colt's dialogue and mannerisms. Colt can be erratic and strange sometimes, using macabre humor to diffuse the violence he's inflicting on people in the time loop.
Oh, you wanted me to answer?
I want to know if you figured out who you really are.
Oh, that's easy. I'm a drinker, occasionally a drunk, man about island. Everyone knows me, everyone hates me, handy with a gun, quick with a joke, I dress well, and why the fuck is everyone wearing a mask?
And sometimes he'll even call Juliana first, instead of waiting for her to contact him.
Juliana. Juliana, you there? Juliana. I remembered your name. Whatever.
Despite the extreme science fiction stakes of the setting and his contentious relationship with Juliana, Colt kinda just needs someone to talk to. He's a violent, broken man. He kinda just needs a friend, and it's a comic tragedy of the game that the closest thing he has to a friend is the woman constantly trying to murder him. Minecraft! I'm in Minecraft!
As much praise as I've been lauding on Deathloop, and I earnestly did enjoy my time playing, it's not perfect, and a lot of critics had a much more sour impression of the game than I did. I found the gameplay engaging, and the moment-to-moment run-and-gun action really dynamic and fun, but I know others got bored of it pretty quickly. I thought many of the environmental puzzles were cool, but some do leave a lot to be desired. The game's open-ended structure really narrows down into a disappointing linearity by the end. The weapons progression basically guarantees that you're going to land on one or two overpowered guns with no motivation to switch off of them, and as much as I love the voice acting for the characters, the writing for Colt and Juliana just gets really bad. Some hours into the game, Colt recovers his lost memories, and he discovers his true connection to Juliana. Colt was a member of Operation Horizon, a scientific program funded by a national superpower called the Motherland. Apparently the Motherland is canonically the island of Tivia from the Dishonored franchise? Okay. Anyway, Colt went to work for Operation Horizon, which was a research program investigating all the time bullshit happening on Blackreef. There, he develops a relationship with a researcher named Lila Blake. This romantic connection blossoms, and while Colt is stuck in the Blackreef time loop on an experimental mission, Lila gives birth to their daughter, Juliana Blake.
Lila Blake. Juliana Blake. No! Come on, no! Fuck!
I wasn't a fan of this twist when I first played the game. I mean, you've got hours of rivalry and banter between Colt and Juliana, and this is all it's been leading up to? Just another dad game? This twist just feels half-baked, unearned, frankly too cliché for a setting as vibrant and interesting as Deathloops. And I wasn't alone in that feeling. Polygon's deputy chief games editor Maddie Myers wrote an article where she talks about how this twist negatively recontextualized some of the game's earlier moments for her. I forgot I can't read.
Colt spends the first third of the game flirting with Juliana. Colt assumes Juliana is his ex-girlfriend during their very first phone call.
We dated, didn't we?
Just go inside the library. You need to see this.
Juliana doesn't correct him, instead choosing to wait until he discovers a document that reveals he's her father. Unlike Oedipus, Colt doesn't seem to experience much suffering in the wake of this realization. You'd think this new information would make Colt more curious, more introspective, and more engaged in conversations with her. Instead, he seems to check her out even more. So, Deathloop has forced me to inhabit a man who sexually harasses his own daughter, yet the story is written so that she's the villain in that situation, the one who tricked him into doing it as a form of eternal torture. Women, am I right?
I've seen people online say that they assumed Colt and Juliana were supposed to be dating, or exes, or divorced husband and wife. While playing the game, my gay ass fully forgot straight people exist, and I imagined them as queer platonic life partners and sort of supernatural soulmates, but not in a romantic sense. And that the natural chemistry of the actors' vocal performances was supposed to key the audience in to a sense of camaraderie or esprit de corps. Like Myers, I found that this twist actually weakened the personality of the characters. Rather than adding depth and investment to their relationship, their conversations after this reveal felt worse to me, knowing that the answer to the mystery was so bog standard. And let me be clear, this isn't Kelly and Akaga's fault in the slightest. Even after this twist is revealed, they play their characters flawlessly. Colt's desperation only grows, and Juliana takes a disconcerting pleasure in torturing her father with this sudden reveal.
Did you know you were my daughter when this started?
Why does that matter?
Because not knowing it makes me feel really weird.
Because you thought we were gonna...
Yeah, I mean, no!
You thought so before the loop, too. Don't remember that, do you?
Why would you do this?
To horrify you. To make you suffer. Come on, it's fun.
But it's a shame that as much passion and work as these actors are putting into their characters, the writing just can't really keep up. Once the twist reveal happens, all we have is a strained relationship between a gruff, violent dad and a precocious yet charming daughter. And that's just a story we've all seen before at this point.
So, take all that context into account when I tell you that one of the game's endings, in fact the ending that people generally hate the most, has my favorite bit of voice acting in the entire game. Okay, here's the setup. Colt has discovered that to end the time loop for good, he needs to kill 7 members of a group called the Visionaries, then Juliana, and then finally himself. Once he's done that, the time loop will destabilize and he will wake up on the beach the next morning, finally at the start of a new day, instead of just repeating the old one.
To enact this plan, Colt takes out the 7 Visionaries and flies an experimental aircraft all the way to Juliana's hidden base at the heart of Blackreef. When you approach, your weapons and powers are temporarily taken away, and Juliana sits you down to explain what's going on. Now that Colt has his memories back, Julia wants him to stay with her, in the loop, and live a life of endless fun and debauchery, letting the rest of the world slide away as they kill each other on Blackreef, forever, in an eternal time-stop playground. She offers Colt an ultimatum in the form of antique dueling pistols. Oh shit, they're Corvos. More Dishonored. Nice. Anyway, Juliana gives you a pistol, and you both hold the firearms to each other's heads. She says, if you fire, you break the loop, and everything comes crumbling down. If the loop is broken, she'll find you and murder you for ruining her perfect endless day. And this time, you'll die for real. No more respawns. Don't fire, and you return to how things once were. Juliana and Colt back on the same team, and they can live out a timeless life of eternal violence and self-indulgence on Blackreef together. If you choose to fire, Colt kills Juliana and leaps into the void to end the loop for good. There's also an ending if you kill Juliana and then refuse to jump off yourself, but I don't have time for fucking centrists. You wake up on the beach with Juliana standing over you with a gun, as promised. But at the last moment, she gives up, unable to kill you for good now that time won't reverse. She simply walks away, and Colt is left disoriented on the beach now that the loop is finally broken.
Let's not mince words here. This ending sucks. And it's supposed to be the good ending, too, where the goal you've been striving for the entire game finally gets accomplished, and this is all we get. Colt remains a lonely, broken, violent man who'll probably be reinstitutionalized should he ever make it back to civilization, and the only person he could conceivably call, not even a friend, just a connection to anyone, hates his guts. So, where's the analysis here? What's the point? If you're caught in a time loop, don't break it, because then you'll be sad and your daughter will hate you. If you're caught in an endless cycle of violence and pain, just cope. L, Maul, Seethe, Ratio, Tommy Tallarico, oof. This ending actually sucked so much that a few months after release, they dropped a free content patch for the game that added an entire music video after this scene, showing the visionaries all running around and reacting to the loop closing, and Colt leading an army of the NPC Eternalists towards something brighter and new. It's fine, but in some ways it's actually a little bit worse than the original ending. It does show the consequences of breaking the loop a little bit better, but it kind of also puts Colt in this heroic posture that weirdly suits him a little less than just being a broken man on a beach somewhere.
But that brings us to the bad ending. If you refuse to shoot Juliana, you admit that she's correct, that the loop is a wondrous miracle, and living inside of it is where you truly thrive. You do not break the loop, and Colt wakes up in an endless cycle, with Juliana, for the first time, there to greet him with open arms. Finally, we've arrived at the moment I want to talk about after, Jesus fucking Christ, 12 pages of script? The screen cuts to black, and just before the credits begin to roll, we get this tiny exchange between Colt and Juliana. Here it is in full.
Okay, plans. What are we doing later?
Already got plans. Party, keg stand, drop Alexis in the meat grinder. You know.
Classy night. Want to get a drink after?
Like, with you?
Yeah.
I like drinking.
Haha, yeah you do.
Think you can keep up?
You survive the party. I'll bring the beers.
So, I admit, this ending also kinda sucks. There's no way to change Juliana's mind here, no appeal to sentiment or care for others, no way for Colt to apologize or atone for his actions, no effort to seek compromise or understanding. Just like the gameplay sequences where Juliana invades your game, only one person can win. Either Colt wins and the loop is broken, or Juliana wins and it's take your daughter to Merc Day until the end of time. Like Myers said, there's no moment of introspection or meaningful change on the part of Colt in his weird flirtatious advances towards his own daughter, or even on the part of Juliana examining why she felt the need to torment her father sexually as well as violently. I mean, the game opens with Juliana literally penetrating Colt, and they expect me not to make Freud jokes? Come on, your mother. The point is, this ending isn't perfect, but just listen to that voice acting. After hours of dying and looping over and over again, with Juliana hanging in this liminal space between friend and foe, hearing the pair finally reconcile in person, finally share some of that chemistry and banter face to face without the filter of a walkie-talkie, I can't help it, it's just magnetic. Listen to how Kelly does this little jovial laugh as Colt.
Party, keg stand, drop Alexis in the meat grinder. You know.
You can feel this self-satisfaction, like a cat in a sunbeam, an animal totally in its element, but combined with Colt's trademark dry humor. Oh, and Juliana. Listen to the subtleties on that yeah from Juliana.
Classy night. Want to get a drink after?
Like, with you?
Yeah.
It's confident, but there's something so blissfully hopeful on the end of that word there, an uptick in the vocals. Like Juliana is trying to play it cool, but She needs Colt to be her friend again so badly that she can't even contain it in her voice. So much dynamic character packed into such a plain line. Ugh. Akage absolutely killed it with Juliana. And yes, I know, I'm looking too deep for things that aren't really there, but you got this far into the video, just humor me for a bit. Oh, and listen to her ending line, too. Listen to the slowdown on "Survive the Party."
Think you can keep up?
You survive the party. I'll bring the beers.
This is the first time in the game we've seen Juliana do something to help Colt, and it's literally couched inside of a threat. Survive the party could mean enjoy the party and try not to get too rowdy, or in this case she could mean I am literally going to try and kill you during this party, and if you survive then I'll get you a drink. Combined with Akage's delivery, it gives the impression that Juliana has taken on some of Colt's dry humor and is spinning it in her own way to communicate both levity and an earnest affection for Colt. And again, it's so small. It's just an offer to get him a beer at some point later in the night, but man, after an entire game of aggression and violence that is canonically, by necessity, a monotonous loop that tears Colt and Juliana apart, having these two characters come together and find not just company, but solace in that violence, this earnest comfort and affection for the acts of violence inflicted on one another, it's something magical. Something that I feel speaks to the effectiveness of these actors' performances. This writing is fine, I guess. It's passable. It communicates a little bit more about the characters than could be told in plain words, which is perfectly good writing. But the actors just bring it to life. It reminds me a little of the Addams Family, how every one of the Addams is a weirdo, and that's the glue that bonds them together. For Gomez and Morticia, it's gloominess and the macabre, and for Colt and Juliana, it's this violence, the chase, the thrill of the hunt. For them, the violence committed within the loop isn't a question of morality. They've essentially checked out of their current lives and have chosen to live in the time loop, as a simulation with the explicit purpose of inflicting pain against a bunch of strangers. It's downright villainous behavior, and I love it. The fact that the other endings are so dull and shit actually amplifies the potency of this little exchange for me. It's as if the game itself thinks that the best possible life for this pair of broken people is to at least be broken together, stuck in a world where the suffering they inevitably will cause is contained. That is a bleak ending to the game, and people didn't seem to resonate with this ending in part because of that bleakness. The idea that the best case scenario for the loop is just to let it ride and find comfort in the friends we made along the way feels just weak. It's hard to swallow. But for me, something about this voice acting just draws me in. As shoddily as these endings are constructed, there's something about the way these characters are performed that makes me convinced that there was some intent here, something powerful. It refuses to answer the questions and the plot hooks established in the main game, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the happiest ending these characters can get is just a little bit askew. Isn't that true for a lot of us, too, in life? For my playthrough, this is the choice my Colt made. And despite all the chaos and the pain and the destruction left in his and Juliana's wake, the love in these characters' voices at the very end almost makes it worth it.
Another game that features a protagonist with amnesia is 2019's Disco Elysium. But while Colt's memory problem stems from his interactions with the time loop, the main character in Disco Elysium brings oblivion upon himself.
There is nothing. Only warm, primordial blackness.
In Disco Elysium, you play as a cop struggling to solve a murder while grappling with your own mind becoming a blank slate. At the start of the game, your protagonist has drunk himself past the point of no return, and you wake up with a massive hangover and no idea who you are, where you are, or what you're doing here. Disco is a detective RPG with a unique skills menu. Rather than a conventional RPG where you can make your character stronger by placing skill points into a lightning bolt spell or a speech score, Disco Elysium has skills like empathy, rhetoric, composure, and pain threshold. These skills represent different aspects of your character's psyche, his personhood. As you explore your surroundings in the game's opening room, you come to realize that these skills are chiming in and talking to you in your own head. You may look up from your trashed hotel room to see a tie stuck to the rotating ceiling fan.
A truly horrific necktie has somehow attached itself to one of the blades.
When your Inland Empire, the imagination skill, speaks up.
Or has it been consigned there as punishment?
If you start the game with a high visual calculus stat, you can stumble over to the broken window and make a digital dice roll to visualize what happened. If you succeed, the world freezes in beautiful oranges and blues as your character calculates the trajectory of an object being hurled through the window pane. Your character can even stop and ask why he's doing this. He doesn't remember. This is just how he interfaces with the world.
Wait, what am I doing?
Something you've done before.
This structure remains true for the whole game. Throughout your adventures in Martinaise, a port district in a city called Revachol, your thoughts will constantly be chiming in, interrupting the narration to provide their insights and opinions.
What can I do for you?
His courtesy is not insincere, but he prefers being alone with his projector. Wow, that's 25 real. That's good money. You need it. He's open. Rip into him. Right hook. Escalate it. Get intimate with him. Bring the hurt closer.
A brawl is surely brewing. You're up!
Now, what I find really interesting about this system is that all of these voices chiming in and talking to you all at once isn't necessarily a good thing. All these little blips, these structures of the mind, they exist as platonic ideals of their fundamental concepts, and relying on one voice is liable to backfire pretty quickly. It may sound like a good idea to be a highly empathetic person, for instance, but if you lean on that empathetic voice too much, you may end up extending empathy to somebody who doesn't deserve it, somebody who will take advantage of it. If you have a high authority stat, late in the game you can come across this extremely well-written but very macabre scene where, in an attempt to intimidate a group of people, your character puts a loaded gun in his own mouth.
What are you doing?
Other people naturally try to stop him, or at least talk him down a little bit, but your internal authority stat keeps egging you on, insisting this is the only thing you can do to command respect.
2, 1. Do it. Get this one thing right.
Waka waka!
Now, when you talk about voice acting in Disco Elysium, there's one name that comes to mind first and foremost. Lenval Brown, the game's narrator. You probably already noticed Brown's rich, smoky voice, which carries you through the entire game from the moment you press start.
Stay. Sail with me through the abyss of pelagic zone.
Brown narrates for the environment, but also voices all of the thoughts in your character's head. Every skill in the game, whenever they speak up, is cloaked in Brown's robust, bassy London accent.
You should totally sing karaoke here, the first chance you get.
Now, this performance has been lauded as one of the best, if not the best, in video game history. And it is. That was easy. But it's not the one I want to talk about.
The first thing you do in Disco Elysium after waking up and meeting your partner Kim is probably to go investigate the body hanging in a tree outside the hotel. In all likelihood, your character won't be able to stomach the first step of the investigation, and Kim will encourage you to take a moment to walk around and get your shit together before you try again. At this point, you have a little time to kill, so you may wind up exploring the bookstore right nearby. The owner of the shop, Plaisance, is a superstitious woman who insists that you cannot explore the rest of the building because it is cursed. Financially cursed. Every business who is opened in this building has mysteriously declared bankruptcy. You can either kick down the door and go exploring yourself, against Plaisance's wishes, or you can convince her that you're really a paranatural detective, here to investigate and break the curse. If you choose to engage with the curse stuff, she gives you the key to the back herself and allows you to go exploring. While you're in here, you can walk around, call a stranger, get jacked, find a gun, hide a corpse in a bear.
Gregory.
But forget about the bear. We're here to look at this furnace.
A thick layer of coal dust covers the furnace.
If you inspect the furnace, you can hear distant chatter. If you then yell up into the flue, a voice will call back down to you.
Hello? Did you say anything? I can't hear you. Please come upstairs. There's a safety curtain on the second floor. I'll open it.
Go upstairs and through the newly opened door, and you'll find yourself in a very strange room, with a woman working at a jeweler's desk. The woman's name is Nia, but the game interface only ever refers to her as Novelty Dice Maker, and I'll just let you listen to her voice for a moment.
Hello. I'm Nia. Did you try knocking on my window? I must have missed you. I've been listening to my Melius. So what kind of die are you looking for? I'm a novelty dice maker. Tell me the name of your role-playing system and I'll make the die you need. That's why you're here, yes?
Nia's story is that she was a jeweler before she became a dice maker. But jewelry is a tough business with a lot of chaotic elements, so she instead found a more stable stream of income in the form of selling dice sets to tabletop enthusiasts. She's indifferent to role-playing games as a whole, but her clientele are enthusiastic and kind and generally have a fair amount of disposable income to spend on extravagant dice collections, so she's been able to live here. She refurbished the furnace's chimney into a little office and home for herself, and she's been holed up here ever since, watching a parade of slapdash business ventures sputter and die in the cursed building while she quietly carried on and made her dice.
I was so absorbed, I must have missed you knocking.
The novelty dice maker is played by a woman named Joanna Nikolova, whom I could not find anything about online. I don't know who she is, or where she's from, or anything. I saw one deleted Reddit post that suggested she may be Bulgarian, based on her name and accent, but that's about all I got. You know you're at rock bottom when you're citing fucking Reddit posts. The only other performance Nikolova is credited with is also from Disco Elysium, a groupie named Measurehead's Babe.
You're so noble, Measurehead.
The point being, I don't know anything about this woman, but if you're out there somewhere, Joanna, good lord, you absolutely killed it with this character. Amazing work, truly.
Nikolova absolutely sells this role. There's this soft-spoken, weary quality to her voice that communicates so much. This ethereal worldliness, a person who certainly hasn't been thriving, but hasn't let the ills and pains of life drag her into the abyss quite yet either. A quiet, stoic woman living in a chimney in a cursed building at the edge of town, just getting by.
Malignant entity? What does that even mean? Some kind of sorceress? What about you, officer? Do you think I'm the malignant entity?
There's also this lovely, ganache-rich timbre to her voice, this gentle sing-song vocal fry that dances just below every word that I find so gorgeous as a detail of character performance.
All I would have seen is my own reflection staring back from the darkness.
But the lines I actually want to talk about require one more step to see. After speaking to Nia, return to Plaisance. You can explain to her that the curse isn't real, and any unusual activity can probably be attributed to the squatter living in the semi-abandoned chimney, or you can outright lie and say that the curse was caused by the taxidermist shop and you performed an ancient rite to dispel the negative energies on her behalf.
Thank you, officer. Truly, you've brought a better psycho-emanation to this humble bookstore, and that's no small achievement.
Okay, that's great, Plaisance. Very good. Now please bring your fucking child indoors. She's freezing to death, you absolute fucking wanker! Then return upstairs to the novelty dice maker, and a new skill check will be available.
The skill is called Shivers, and it's one of the best things ever put into any video game. Everyone I know who's played Disco Elysium has fallen in love with this esoteric little bastard, and I have too. So, let me explain why.
Every skill in the game will, at some point, actively try to help you along in solving the mystery. Obviously, things like physical strength, hand-eye coordination, and memory recall are important for a detective, but even the most out-there skills have key moments where they directly engage with the murder case. Drama is a weird thespian who calls you sire all the time, but also helps you lie and detect when other people are lying. Savoir-faire is essentially the game's coolness stat, charisma and flow as an extension of the physical body. But it also lets you perform certain feats of acrobatics that give you access to critical avenues of evidence. Electrochemistry is your id, your lust, your compulsion to drink, to take drugs, to vice. That guy's an asshole, and a pervert, but lust and vice are actually cornerstone elements of the case you're investigating, and suddenly his repertoire becomes a lot more applicable to your police inquiry than you might have otherwise thought.
All of the skills in the game have these critical moments of aid, except for Shivers. Shivers is a tickle on the back of your neck. It's an electric pulse of some kind, tapping into your surroundings. It's kind of the city itself. It's your goosebumps, basically. No, not that one. Fuck.
Shivers is the most inscrutable of all of your skills. Unlike the other voices in your head who speak to you in real time about information directly pertinent to your case, Shivers speaks to you in imagery.
From out on the bay, a cool wind gathers. It sweeps into the city, tugging at the textiles hanging around the stand. Water everywhere, pouring from the heavens in the shadow of the old church. A former architect stands before a slice of window, a room plan in her hand. A cold wave has made the air in the building stand still and frozen.
It describes people and places, the sights and sounds of Revachol, a trapdoor into the pulse of the city below your feet. It rarely, if ever, talks directly to you. It paints scenes, injects sensations and memory and half-forgotten dreams into the game's world, which makes it all the more interesting when you return to Nia and are prompted with a heroic Shivers check, asking you to beat a 15 on a roll of 2 6-sided dice. This may appear impossible on the surface, but Disco Elysium has some mechanics that make this feat a little more doable. For instance, you add your total Shivers score to the roll, and you can add bonuses to the stat by wearing different clothes, like this sexy man t-shirt I found in a pawn shop. What do you mean too old for this shirt? What the fuck, dude? I can wear whatever I want. Eat shit. Or if you do manage to roll those 2 6s, you get a critical success and automatically beat the check regardless of the total number. But conversely, if you roll 2 1s, you auto-fail. However you get there, once you pass the check, you get this very special exchange of dialogue. And now, this is going to be a 4-way conversation between your character, description tags, Brown's narration, and the novelty dice maker herself, so I'm going to try and splice the dialogue together as best I can, but try listening to Nia's voice in particular.
Are you looking for a die?
A gust of cold air sweeps through the chimney. The stones and minerals on the shelves rattle as though agitated. For a moment, it almost feels as though you're outside the building, exposed to the atmosphere.
This is just a theory, but hear me out. I think I know why your business hasn't failed.
Didn't we already talk about this?
She asks as the wind continues to seep in through the cracks in the old chimney.
It's because you're not in the same building as the others. This isn't technically the doomed commercial area.
What are you talking about?
She says, shaking her head.
My address is exactly the same. Rue de Saint-Guilain 10.
No, the old coal plant that used to be here was subsumed into the new venture. Its ruins swallowed up, yet it has a different address in the heart of the city.
No, this used to be a coal plant.
You touch the safety curtains.
You're in the chimney of another building.
This doesn't make any sense.
She looks around the makeshift nest that she has carved out for herself, bewildered.
Are you saying my business was spared because of a technicality? Where is this coming from?
It has a different address in the heart of the city.
And what? Does it mean that I'm safe from failure?
No one's ever really safe from the failure.
She starts laughing, her fingers trying to rub away the exhaustion from her face.
What?
Do you know what this is?
She raises her hand to reveal a piece of metal shining on her index finger.
Your lucky charm? Some kind of award?
It's a mourning ring.
She replies.
I made this when my first company failed. It was a small jewelry shop right here in the East Delta Commerce Center, built with the little I inherited from my parents. I drove it into the ground within a year. I didn't have what you would call a viable business plan.
Why are you telling me this?
It wasn't just a jewelry shop either. I always thought that it was just the world that you were supposed to try again and again until you finally succeed. And now you're telling me what?
She closes her eyes.
That it was all because I didn't run my little shops and ventures from a dump inside an abandoned chimney?
Don't call it a dump. You've made it nice and cozy here.
Yeah.
She stares out of the window, not really hearing your words.
Or maybe it's the entire world that's cursed. It's such a precarious place. Nothing ever works out the way you want it. That's why people like role-playing games. You can be whoever you want to be, you can try again. Still, there is something inherently violent even about dice rolls. It's like every time you cast a die, something disappears. Some alternative ending or an entirely different world. But anyway, thanks for sharing your theories, officer.
Going through this conversation unlocks something special, a thought called the precarious world. In this game, your character can consider ideas and thoughts and decide whether or not to incorporate them into his larger identity. If you choose to integrate the precarious world thought, it takes 4 in-game hours of time to mull it over. During this time, you suffer a penalty that every red check, dice rolls that you can only try one time in the whole game and usually have a major impact on the story, are guaranteed to fail. But once you've had time to mull it over, the thought concludes, and you get something I find really beautiful, actually. your thresholds for critical success and critical failure are reduced by 1. Now, instead of rolling double 6s for critical success, you can do so on double 6s or on a 6 and a 5. Conversely, now autofails can happen both when rolling Snake Eyes or when rolling a 1 and a 2. Deathloop was an instance of the game's mechanics and writing working against the voice acting and creating this weird dissonance. This is a moment where the mechanics and writing are in perfect lockstep with each other, and I think the result is something really potent and heartfelt and profound. Listening to Nia's voice makes your character fundamentally reconsider the nature of success and failure. Listen to the way Nikolova reads this line here.
It's a morning ring.
It's a morning ring. It has the expected explanatory cadence. She's literally explaining to the character and the player what this object is. It is a morning ring. But there's also this wash of familiarity and pain and loss. Maybe even a hint of pride somewhere in there, like despite the loss of the business, she doesn't regret the failure because it taught her so much. Or here, listen to the muted exaggeration on this line about role-playing games.
That's why people like role-playing games. You can be whoever you want to be, you can try again. Still, there is something inherently violent even about dice rolls.
Oh, it's so good. Like, she's forcing herself to understand the purpose of her own occupation in real time, but it's also a metatextual nod to the player, literally engaging in a role-playing game right now. And listen again to these closing lines now that we know that the precarious world thought mechanically encourages critical success and failure.
It's like every time you cast a die, something disappears. Some alternative ending or an entirely different world.
Oh, listen to that fry on world.
Or an entirely different world.
There's so much somberness and creak to her voice. The words seem to trickle out like molasses on her tongue. Her tone feels distant and languid, as if she's speaking more about life than she is about general dice rolls. And her tone is exactly right. Every time you cast a die in this game, something literally does disappear. A conversation tree can open or close, an avenue of evidence, a line of inquiry can be shut down on a literal roll of the dice. Because that is the substance this world is built upon. It is a literal foundational element of this interactive text. But the way Nikolova reads Nia for this moment, it feels like she knows that. There's this undercurrent of pain and resigned sadness as she looks at the dice on her desk, like she somehow understands that the dice hold a real fundamental power in her world. Now, I don't mean to say that I think this character is literally omnipotent and knows she's in a video game or whatever, but that the voice acting performance has so much understated life and spirit imbued within it that it makes me feel like there's a real person underneath these lines of code. A forlorn soul. Troubled, but somehow unburdened and free as well.
The Novelty Dice Maker is not an important character in Disco Elysium. She was working the night of the murder, but she couldn't see anything out of her window in the dark, and she has nothing to hide and nothing to gain from messing you around. She's just here, in her cozy little makeshift home. You can still talk to her, you can buy a set of dice if you want, they have some token mechanical significance, but the fact that her relationship to the case is so tertiary actually kind of makes me love the inclusion of this character even more. Throughout my playthrough, I returned to this chimney multiple times, even after I had exhausted all of the dialogue options, just to enjoy the company of this strange woman and her steely, raspy voice. She may not have been an important character, but the Novelty Dice Maker was my favorite character in Disco Elysium. For me, she was my eye in the hurricane. She was this tangible reminder that the world is frightening out there, but it's always safe to step inside, have a chat, and rest before heading back out into the storm.
What if we took a look at some voice acting that is explicitly directed towards the player? The Beginner's Guide by Davey Wreden is the 2015 follow-up to his most famous project, 2013's The Stanley Parable. Actually, The Stanley Parable is also known for its narrator, Kevin Brighting. In the game, you play as an office worker named Stanley. As you play, the narrator reads aloud the events of the story before they happen.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Meaning the player has a chance, if they want, to disobey.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
So, Stanley Parable is this smash success, and Davey Wreden is suddenly thrust into the limelight as this auteur game dev experimenting with metatextual storytelling. So, how do you, as a game dev, whose best known work involves the metatextual relationship between a player and narrator, follow that game up. Well, what if you became the narrator?
Hi there. Thank you very much for playing the Beginner's Guide.
Beginner's Guide is explicitly constructed for you, the player's benefit. At least that's what the game wants you to think. The setup is Davy Wreden, here voiced by the actual real-life man of the same name who wrote the Stanley Parable, once had a friend who went by the name of Coda. Coda was a game developer, like Davy, and he spent a few years making a bunch of small, bite-sized games from 2008 to 2011. These games were usually simple, sometimes being as rudimentary as one hallway or a single room where you just walk around and look at stuff, but Davy really liked these games because, as amateurish as they were, he felt that they said something about Coda. He could see a spark of passion that he loved somewhere in Coda's work.
This is what I like about all of Coda's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator.
At some point down the road, Coda stopped making games. So Davy is here to show you, yes, you, sitting at your desk eating several dozen raw eggs out of an extra large popcorn bucket, what Coda's games are about and what symbolism Davy sees within them. Throughout the Beginner's Guide, Davy shows the player around Coda's library of games in chronological order and just narrates his thoughts about them. He talks about a game where you can only move backwards and how it feels focused and precise. He talks about a game with a long stairwell that leads to a cozy room full of floating game ideas, discussing how it represents a comfort in Coda and a serenity in his own work.
Coda would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said that he knew that he was actually a vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that.
As time goes on, Coda begins to exhibit certain patterns. Davy notes that Coda keeps placing lampposts at the end of his games to dictate where they're supposed to end, suggesting that the lamppost evokes something special to Coda. Maybe the glow of an urban streetlight indicates warmth, or hearth, or community. And their purpose as a narrative device is to signal some kind of certainty and destination in his endings.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that up to this point, he's been making really strange and abstract games with no clear purpose, and maybe you can only float around in that headspace for so long. Because now he wants something to hold on to. He wants a reference point. He wants the work to be leading to something. He wants a destination, which is what this lamppost is. It's a destination.
There's this puzzle that keeps reappearing, a pair of doors with a lever on the outside. The solution is to flick the switch to open the door, flick it again to close it, and then dash through the first door while it's closing to open up the second one. After a few instances of this puzzle, Davy explains that he feels it represents a mechanism by which Coda can let go of certain negative feelings plaguing his life.
In each of his games, after exploring a theme that, he might find difficult, Coda can then place this puzzle that he knows has a reliable solution, he understands exactly how it works, and so it gives him a simple mechanism for moving on.
For the majority of the game, Davy's narration, delivered by Wreden, is quite charming and personable. Wreden has a relaxed but enthusiastic voice, giving the impression that Davy is excited and eager to tell the player about the intricacies of game development and his own interpretations of Coda's work.
His house cleaning level almost feels like cleansing. It's the moment after a particularly difficult or traumatic experience where you just need to let it sit and digest inside of you, and eventually cohere into something meaningful.
He also manages a few tempered jokes in his own awkward little way.
Apparently this space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know.
The sum total of this friendly, idiosyncratic narration is a picture of Davy as a well-meaning, if a little socially ungraceful person who is operating on a level of good faith artistic analysis and critique. However, as the game goes on, the player has some moments to read between the lines and truly examine Davy's behavior for what it is. You may notice that Davy has a habit of editing Coda's games here and there. He teleports the player around, he lets you see through walls, skips past sections he finds boring or pointless. That cozy game ideas room from before comes at the end of an impossibly long stairwell. The higher you climb up the steps, the slower and slower you become until you're all but at a complete standstill. That's how Coda made the game, but Davy steps in and edits the code so you can return to your normal walking speed, allowing you access into Coda's secret room.
I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself.
If Davy is trying to give us a fair impression of Coda's games, isn't it a little weird? Almost rude, really, that he's editing them beyond what Coda intended? If I handed you a book, and you opened it up and saw that I had scratched out a bunch of the words in pen, you wouldn't be getting a fair assessment of what the author intended, and it's kind of rude of me to do that in the first place, right? So, what gives? And also, wait, did Davey even have Coda's permission to do this in the first place? The beginner's guide is like $10 on Steam. Is it really fair for this guy to be taking a bunch of games he didn't make, packaging them into this collection with his analysis taped on the side, and selling it? Without the author seemingly present at all? It's just strange. Later in the game as well, Davey admits that he's taken some of Coda's games and edited them like he's done for you, and shown them to people in his real life.
Because it would never occur to Coda to start actively soliciting feedback, so what if I did it for him? So I started showing Coda's work to people. I took this one, and the islands which you just played, the theater, the notes, the house cleaning game, and some of the prison escape games. I brought them to people that I knew and trusted. I asked their opinions. And the great part is that they really loved his games. You know, the point of it all was just to give him some external reference point, but they genuinely loved his work. There was nothing for him to be afraid of.
And that's gotta be a breach of privacy, right? Taking someone's art and showing it to someone else without permission? That's weird at best. But Davey's amicable vocal performance, and the fact that he is our narrator and holds this position of empathy over the player, kinda makes it easy to just let it slide.
As time goes on, Coda's design choices become pained and alienating. He makes games about isolating himself from the world, about his work hurting him, even giving the player a gun and tasking them with shooting a machine that represents Coda himself. Davey feels that these patterns in Coda's work are evidence that Coda is in trouble, and that his help is needed now more than ever.
Can you see why I felt like this was the right thing to do? Because it's the thing that I always feel like I need, to be told that my work is good, that I am good.
By this time, it's obvious that something deeper is going on here. Something's wrong with Davey. It's just not perfectly clear exactly what, until the final game. So, Coda sends one last game to Davey and then disappears from his life entirely. The game is called The Tower, and it's an ominous, foreboding, detached game. You walk around this brutalist superstructure, a seemingly endless fugue of concrete hallways and corridors. Even the mechanics of the level seem deliberately designed with malice, as if the game hates you for even trying to play it. You can find an invisible labyrinth where, if you touch the walls, the screen flashes bright red and teleports you back to the start. Davey makes a bridge to help you cross it. You can find a door that only opens with a passcode that you do not have. Davey writes it on the ground for you. Finally, you reach a room with a door that simply will never open. Davey opens it for you.
So even if you somehow brute forced your way through the first two challenges, and you got to this point, there's actually just no way to progress. And it's scary for me, the idea of Coda cutting himself off entirely, just saying, you know, that's it, that's the end of the conversation, not giving me any way to fix the problem. I feel like a failure, I guess, when I can't fix the problem. But I can open this door for you, so let me do that.
The player ascends to the top of the tower to find a polished modern room decorated like a museum. A cordoned exhibit on the wall reads,
Dear Davey, thank you for your interest in my games. I need to ask you not to speak to me anymore.
I'm the reason that you stopped making games, aren't I?
This wasn't a game. It was a test. A test to see if Davey would go in and edit the games like he always does. A test to see if Davey would grant Coda respect and compassion and privacy in his work, and he utterly failed. By the way, this game gets way funnier after you know that the real-life Davey Wreden is the brother of Twitch.tv streamer Doug Doug.
3D.
Anyway, you walk through this museum as Davey comes to this crushing realization that the reason Coda stopped making games is because of his actions. He needed there to be a deeper meaning, a window into Coda's soul so badly that he ended up poisoning game development for him entirely. Davey thought he was being a good friend to Coda by sharing his work with others, when in reality his actions served only to fulfill his selfish need to feel like an important, good person at the expense of Coda's personal safety and security. Davey has been your primary point of empathy through the entire game up to this point, and only now it's revealed that he committed this act of deep betrayal.
Would you stop changing my games? Stop adding lampposts to them? Would you simply let them be what they are? When I'm around you, I get physically ill.
Finally, here's the moment I wanted to show you. It's a bit of a long one, so strap in. The player walks down a hallway filled with messages from Coda until they reach his signature puzzle door. You open the door, flip the switch to close it again, and dart inside. The walls begin to rumble, and Davy begins to speak.
That's why I'm releasing this collection of your work, is because I haven't been able to find any other way to reach you. I've tried everything. And so a part of me has hope that if I put this compilation out into the world, and if I put my name on it, that maybe enough people will play it so that it'll find its way to you, so that I can tell you that I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. If I apologize to you truly and deeply, will you start making games again? Please, I need to feel okay with myself again. And I always felt okay as long as I had your work to see myself in. I mean, is something wrong with me? Because I know that I did an awful thing, and I'm doing it again right now. Like, I'm showing people your work, but I can't stop myself from doing it. That's how badly I need to feel something again, like I'm an addict. There has to be something wrong with me. Can I apologize? What if I tell you I was wrong? Will that work? Will that fix it? I don't know. I don't think it will, but there's nothing else that I can do. Just tell me what you want. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please, start making games again. Please help me. Please give me some of whatever it is that makes you complete. I want whatever that wholeness is that you just summoned out of nothing and you put into your work. You were complete in some way that I never was. And I want to know I want to know how to be a good person. I want to know how not to hate myself. Please. I'm fading, and all I want is to know that I'm going to be okay.
Jesus Christ. Where to even begin? Well, I'd say this is the game's moment where it finally tips its hand, and confirms something that some players may not have realized, that this game is truly fictional.
The beginner's guide uses the real voice of the real-life Davy Wreden to essentially trick the player into thinking that this could be a real thing that really happened. But here, this performance from Davy goes well beyond what any reasonable person could consider non-fiction. I mean, are we supposed to believe that Davy had this huge falling out due to this incredible betrayal, and the best thing he could think to do to solve it was this sniveling, whining, half-apology sold on Steam for $10 a pop? No, obviously not. This is the game explaining that it's trying to be fiction, that it's trying to tell a story. There is no Coda. There never was. This entire game is structured exactly as the real-life Davy Wreden wants it to be.
The monologue then moves us into this place of artifice, of performance. It reminds me of a classic theatrical soliloquy. Davy speaking, or in this case, crying like a cuck, his thoughts out on center stage to the benefit of the audience without directly communicating with another character in the story. Even though he claims to be speaking to Coda, out there somewhere in the world, he's really speaking to us. Listen to the way Wreden's voice breaks as he leads up to this first apology.
That maybe enough people will play it so that it'll find its way to you, so that I can tell you that I'm sorry.
Wreden swallows the E on that word tell, as if his throat is clenched with tension, struggling to form the words before he bursts into tears. You may also notice this line begins with a slow, sighing intake of breath.
That maybe enough people will play it so that it'll find its way to you, so that I can tell you that...
As a performer or an editor, you don't have to leave those in. Cutting out those breaths is easy, and one of the first things you learn how to do when mastering vocal audio. Leaving these breaths in is a deliberate choice, and to me, it further emphasizes that theatrical tone I mentioned before. Cutting out the breathing gives this polished, professional quality to a mix of audio, but leaving them in feels like Wreden is delivering a one-act play to a live audience. And in the context of the game, it makes it feel like Davy is so overcome with nerves and grief and self-anguish that he can't even keep his recording professional anymore. It's all just pouring out and he can't control it. We can hear this examined further when Davy talks about the jealousy he feels for Coda.
Please, start making games again. Please help me. Please give me some of whatever it is that makes you complete. I want whatever that wholeness is that you just summoned out of nothing and you put into your work. You were complete in some way that I never was.
The tempo of his words, the fact that the syllables kind of get frantic and jumbled together at certain points, like Davy can no longer control what he's saying as the sentence goes on, like scarab beetles pushing past the lips of a mummified corpse. He's desperate. He's beyond desperate, he's panicking. He knows he's panicking, and that makes him panic even more, and the fact that the only way he knows to contact Kota is to betray him yet again just tears him up inside. Listen for the moments of stammering, sharp, jarring voice cracks, like when Davy starts speaking in the language of addiction.
And I'm doing it again right now. Like, I'm showing people your work, but I can't stop myself from doing it. That's how badly I need to feel something again, like I'm an addict. There has to be something wrong with me.
Listen to the delivery on addict there, that high pitch, the dubious half chuckle that leads into the word before settling in on this breathy sigh.
Feel something again, like I'm an addict. There has to be something wrong with me.
It's as if Davy didn't anticipate getting this emotional while recording these lines, and yet here he is, bleeding for all to see. He's cultivating this strange, false sympathy, as if the more desperate and crazed he sounds, the more likely Kota is to forgive him and come back. Of course, this is abuse, and this tactic of using self-deprecation to paint oneself in a pitiable light is common among abusers in real life. And that choice tells us everything we need to know about Davy's intentions in this moment. Finally, let's look at the closing lines. Listen to the exhalation on the final please, like the rest of the sentence took an agonizing amount of effort to contain such that he's physically exhausted by the end of it.
I want to know how to be a good person. I want to know how not to hate myself. Please. I'm fading, and all I want is to know that I'm going to be okay.
Hear the way the G in go punctuates the rest of that sentence before we close on this pleading, helpless okay.
And all I want is to know that I'm going to be okay.
Reedon's performance as Davy here is undeniably effective. It twists my stomach hearing this man beg with so much earnest emotion for forgiveness while still being incapable of internalizing why what he did is wrong. But this display of emotion here serves another purpose. It makes reading the text as a biography a sudden impossibility. Reedon's voice builds a fourth wall into a game that has spent a full hour pretending to knock it down. It makes the player ask, why did I assume all of this was real to begin with? Why was I so willing to accept his side of the story just because he told me to? How did I miss all the red flags when they were right in front of me?
To this day, players of the Beginner's Guide don't all agree on whether or not Davy's version of events is real. Some people say that Kota isn't a real person, but was based on a real relationship that the real-life Reedon actually ruined. I like to think that Kota's more of a conceptual thing, like maybe Kota represents the broader expectations of the games industry as a whole, or Davy's internal self-critique. I don't know. There are some people out there who truly believe that Davy actually ruined his relationship with the real-life Kota, and we should take the version of events as presented in the game as 100% literal. And if you believe that bullshit, subscribe to my Patreon! You're clearly such a fan of being told how to feel and what to think, you fucking sheep! I'm kidding, obviously. If that's your interpretation of the game, that's totally fine. But I do think we get something really special if we choose to interpret Davy's speech and Reedon's performance as being fictional. For my money, Reedon has cast himself in the role of this semi-sympathetic but ultimately morally corrupt abuser. This man who would befriend someone just to take advantage of them, their attention and validation. This man who would go behind your back and betray you under the guise of giving you a helping hand. This man who would take your art and rip it apart at the very foundation and rebuild it into a frame that makes him look like this brilliant intellectual rather than just going to fucking therapy. And however you think the game is supposed to be interpreted, the fact that we can have so many differing opinions about the very same words is a testament to the real-life effort that the real-life Davy Reedon put into voicing himself.
The last game I want to talk about begins with a whisper.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Transistor is the 2014 release from Supergiant Games, the studio known for the Smash 2018 hit Hades Nuts.
Stupid boy.
Supergiant has a great story. They started as a passionate group of friends who all left their jobs to make it in the indie game space. Their first 3 games were instant cult classics, and to this day the company has a strong no crunch time policy, prioritizing positive treatment of employees over the short-term profits, a tragically rare stance in the video game industry. One of the team members who helped put Supergiant on the map back in the day is Logan Cunningham, the voice actor who we just heard in that opening line. Cunningham is an excellent voice actor, and his low, dulcet voice adds even more evidence to my daddy kink theory. But in Transistor specifically, Cunningham plays the role of the Transistor, the talking sword that the player wields throughout the entire game. He serves as sort of a diegetic narrator, commenting on events as they happen from inside the Transistor's blade.
Okay, there's a... Wait. Back.
Once again, this is a fantastic performance. And, once again, I am a predictable hack, and it is not the one I'm here to talk about.
Transistor is a science fiction story set in a digital city called Cloudbank. There is theoretically a real world outside of Cloudbank, but we never learn anything about it in the game. Basically, Cloudbank is a post-scarcity digital utopia, where nobody wants for anything and all questions are decided by the people. Everything from what buildings get built to the color of the sky to the daily weather gets voted on democratically.
Wish it was raining. Cover your tracks. Rain's not even on the ballot. Mild and inoffensive.
For much of the citizenry, Cloudbank is a paradise. Red, the player character, was a popular singer whose music touched the hearts of thousands. However, not everyone found the state of the city to be quite as idyllic. 4 members of Cloudbank's elite found the ever-shifting nature of the city to be concerning, dangerous even. They formed a group called the Camerata, with the goal to create some semblance of stability and consistency in the city, a worldview exemplified in their founding mantra, "When everything changes, nothing changes." The Camerata weren't just a political movement, however. They were armed with something special, a weapon of sorts called the Transistor. Beyond its obvious combat functions, the Transistor also has the capability to capture and store data. Throughout the game, you can find remnants of living people, the citizens of Cloudbank, whom you can download into the Transistor to upgrade your skills. So the Transistor is kind of a digital world inside of a digital world. You can log on to Cloudbank, but if you get killed by the Transistor while you're there, you get permanently trapped in the digital world inside the sword itself.
Red, let's go. While we still can.
So the Camerata want to build a new world. They're using the Transistor to assassinate unique or notable people and download their consciousnesses into the blade for their own use. Usually they go after small-scale targets, individuals who show passion and promise but whose disappearance could be covered up without much issue. However, that changed when the group went after Red. The Camerata attempted to attack and download Red into the Transistor after a performance one night. Thanks to some bad intel, Red wasn't alone. She was with a mysterious unnamed man. The game actually never tells us this guy's name, but the internal files refer to him as the Boxer, so we'll go with it. So they try to capture Red, but the Boxer jumps in the way of the blade and takes the hit for her. Red's life was saved, but the Transistor was still able to download one thing: Red's voice. And that brings us back here to the start of the game, with Red, unable to speak, cradling the body of her lost companion when his voice begins to emanate from the blade.
Hey, Red.
However, there's a big problem. The Transistor does one more thing. In the right hands, it can be used to control an army of mysterious robots called the Process. These bots are kinda like the code of Cloudbank itself. Whenever the citizens vote on something, the Process are the ones who actually go in behind the scenes and make it happen, unbeknownst to the city's populace. They're also somewhat alive in their own way, changing and evolving into more biological forms throughout the game. The Camerata had the Transistor before, and they were the ones keeping the Process in check. But in the scuffle of the assassination attempt, Red got the sword, meaning the one thing keeping the Process under control is gone. The game follows Red as she fights the corrupted Process all through Cloudbank in an effort to find the people responsible and set things right.
Okay, that was a lot of summary. So let's get on with what I'm actually here to talk about.
The Camerata has 4 members, so first you go after Sybil, a high society socialite who fell in love with Red and deliberately botched her assassination in an effort to win her affections. You kill her in a boss fight, download her into the Transistor, and she tells you to go after a married couple named Asher and Grant Kendrell. Grant in particular, as he's one of the founding members of the Camerata. You go to find them, but by the time you get there, the pair have already committed suicide. Wait, are all the villains in this game gay and dead? Come on, guys, you can't do that, it's Pride Month! Anyway, you download the queers, and with the rest of the Camerata stuck in your sword, there's only one more person to turn to. Royce Brackett. To find him, you need to backtrack through some of the areas you've already visited. By this point, the process has devoured the landscape, turning everything into stark, inhuman blocks of white. Finally, you return to the very start of the game, and you meet this cute little robot proxy.
Hey, look.
Begin. This is Royce Brackett of the Camerata, communicating via proxy. I am calling for a truce.
Voices play a particular role in Transistor. Red is a singer who has lost her voice, lost her ability to communicate with others and impact the world like she did through her music. The boxer is the opposite. He is only a voice, and he gave up his physical body in an act of protective love towards Red. Sybil has this beautifully distorted song during her boss fight, demonstrating her absolute deterioration, both from the process and her own emotions. Asher is a writer, and Grant is basically a government employee. A big story moment happens just before you find their bodies, where Asher orates a written confession, taking blame for the process's attack.
To the people of Cloudbank, we did this. This is a formal admission of guilt. I solemnly swear everything written here is true. Know that I am responsible for these heinous acts perpetrated against the city of Cloudbank.
In this moment, Asher is using his voice as an expression of guilt, while simultaneously shielding Grant from public failure. Unlike Asher, Grant works from behind the scenes, so it's fitting that we never hear his voice through the entire game at all. And then there's Royce, with the most dialogue in the entire game outside the boxer's narration.
The transistor. What can it do? What can it really do? Well, it can build a bridge. For example, that's something. People want a bridge to Fairview, sure. Why not? It's settled. Have a beautiful new bridge.
Royce is played by Sunkrish Bala, and his performance of the character provides a somewhat peculiar way of speaking when compared to the rest of the game's cast. His voice is delicate, almost painfully soft. His C and S sounds are rounded into gentle whistles, and he has a habit of repeating himself almost mnemonically, as if he's practicing his speech at the same time he's actually saying it.
The process can't be stopped. Can't be stopped. However, the process could be impelled to simply go away.
Royce was the other founding member of the Camerata, with Grant. But while Grant was a high-ranking government official, Royce was an impassioned engineer and architect. He designed beautiful, wonderful buildings for the people of Cloudbank. But the whims of the people move quickly in a city where you can vote on anything you like. So, after a while, all of his designs fell into faded memory. I think this performance of Royce is absolute genius in its subversion. You spend the entire game learning who the Camerata are and how they rose to such power and influence, and then you get here expecting something big and imposing and grandiose, maybe domineering almost, befitting what we would expect out of a hostile government takeover, but then you have this soft, gentle performance from Bala.
Royce explains to the player that he was the one who discovered the process and the transistor, and that he's the one who knows how to stop them once he gets it back from Red. The way the character is performed, though, feels timid and strayed. Critically, though, one thing I don't hear in this performance is shame. Bala gives Royce this intoxicatingly banal energy. He appears to not be a meaningful threat, and yet seeing him so meek and non-confrontational defies the fact that he destroyed the entire city, and doesn't seem to be very sorry about it.
We knew we'd have our detractors. What we were doing was wrong. In the traditional sense. In the contemporary sense.
By the time you arrive at his lair and see him in person for the first time, Bala's performance has filled you with this fascinating cocktail of confidence, but also dread and unease. He asks you to return the transistor to its cradle, and he'll be able to use it to call off the process, and they can rebuild the city. Rebuild it better, even. Exactly how the two of them want it to be. This offer seems suspicious at best, and the game even gives Royce a special dialogue interaction if you linger too long while making the choice.
Look, if this was all just some kind of ruse on my part, I mean, how base. Why would I lead you all this way?
But with no other alternative, Red gives up the transistor and places it into the cradle. Suddenly, both her and Royce are transferred into the sword. Turns out the transistor can only have one admin user at a time. With Royce and Red both here, it has two. So there's no choice but to fight. But it's a game and you're the protagonist, so you beat him.
Impossible. No, it can't. It can't be. God, please don't be. God, please don't.
I knew it! All the gays are dead in this game! How dare you! It's Pride Month!
But even after Royce is defeated, there's still one last moment I want to talk about. So, after the boss fight, instead of choosing to live as a god in Cloudbank, Red turns the transistor on herself, downloading herself into the Blade to live with the Boxer forever. The credits roll, a song plays, it's gorgeous, yeah, and we're done. Except, now you've unlocked New Game Plus mode. A New Game Plus mode is generally a harder difficulty designed for people who have already beaten the game one time and have a good grasp on the game's combat or mechanics. It generally just adds some replay value to your game and won't really impact the story.
So, just like before, you start the game up and draw the sword from the Boxer once again. And that's when it happens.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
When I played this moment for the first time years ago, I got fucking chills. Bala taking over and stealing the Boxer's opening line from the beginning of the game is such a flawless continuation of Royce's subversive characterization. You can't get a true read on this guy, even between save files. Listen to the sinister energy of this Hey Red.
Hey, Red.
The Boxer's Hey Red sounded warm, familiar, reassuring.
Hey, Red.
But Royce's sounds conniving, taunting, like an animal playing with its food.
Hey, Red.
And the second sentence resolves that tone with Royce's distinct, characteristic little sibilance on the S.
We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
I love it so much. It's such powerful characterization in performance alone. Directly after this, the transistor returns to normal for the rest of the game. The New Game Plus is more or less identical to the base game, and Brackett's voice doesn't come back unexpectedly like this again. But this moment gave me something that I didn't think a voice acting performance could execute on in such a subtle way. Playing this for the first time, blindsided by this line, sitting alone in the dark, I felt this awful pit of horror at the thought of Red's love being ripped away again and replaced with this sinister, parasitic man. This man who is too proud of his work to accept that the nature of artistic creation is an act of service as much a mode of self-expression. Someone who would rather rule over a kingdom of nothing than accept the flaws and quirks that make us human, even in a digital city stored somewhere in the cloud. You'd have a hard time claiming Transistor is a horror game, but this short moment of voice acting rattled me more than any horror I can think of.
ENIAC will tell you that there's infinite numbers of ways to read a line. Take the line, I love you. Now, we could put emphasis on different words, for example. You could say, I love you, versus I love you. We can change the tonality of the line. We can say a higher, brighter, I love you, which comes across very different to a more muted, restrained, I love you. You can change the emotional tone of your sentence. A pleading, I love you, feels different than an indignant, I love you, versus a casual, I love you. The key thing in acting, especially voice acting, where a performer is probably only going to have control over their voice, and other elements like blocking, or expression, or context will be determined by other people at a later time, is to have your words communicate more than they do in isolation on the page. Your job is to take what the writers give you and give it a soul, something people fundamentally believe in their guts. It requires skill and training and hours upon hours of practice that I sure as hell don't have, but also an understanding of form and restraint. Believe me, if you take a big swing with your voice acting performance and miss...
Carly! Oh my God!
Jason! That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
People are gonna notice.
That's why I needed to share these moments with you. To share what I find so wonderful and meaningful in this work, and why I've been so careful to share the actors' names with you while we go. So when Kelly and Akaga bring Colt and Juliana to life with an electrifying chemistry,
think you can keep up?
You survive the party. I'll bring the beers.
Or when Nikolova instills a tranquil empathy into the novelty dice maker, providing comfort to this chaotic, precarious world.
There is something inherently violent even about dice rolls.
Or when Reedon's extreme emotions flood into a twisted performance of himself as an abusive man broken by hubris and self-loathing.
And all I want is to know that I'm going to be okay.
Or when Bala surprises the player with Royce in a moment of understated but deeply profound existential horror.
Hey, Red.
You remember the people responsible for lending so much of their heart and passion to these characters that we all love.
Thank you.